Greetings, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to Thru Port Collective. We are here to discuss all things music and creation-wise and production-wise and as consumers and creators, in fact. So thanks for joining us on the show. I have a little delay I need to address. I'm sorry. Okay, now I'm back. Sorry about that. So with me is the usual hosts here. We have Cryss Smith. Cryss.
Hello,
how's it
good
going?
evening, guys.
And we have Marshal Arnold.
Howdy.
And today our special guest is my good friend Ben Jackson. Hello, Ben, and thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk today. We have a main topic which we always pick for our weekly show, but today it's basically about blurring the lines between using electronic instruments and acoustic instruments in various production elements. So that's going to be our focus when we get over to it, but we like to swim around in the shallow end for a second, usually just for fun. And just kind of talk about whatever crops up. But let's go around the horn again and just quickly kind of find out what's been happening. Cryss, how about you? What's been going on?
Yeah, I just had a really busy week around here, but I managed to pick up a little something, so I got some stuff in the mail. And so Soldano, whose amplifiers I love, and I've got a SLO 100 watt over there. But that thing gets to be a little bit too big to take around a lot of places. And so, but I still love the high gain tone it has. So they just released some pedals that have kind of the preamp sound of the SLO. So I was really excited about that. So looking forward to getting that in the mill. But I pre-ordered a custom color one, a limited edition. So I've got one coming in purple, and I'm very excited about it. But I'll have to wait until December.
Nice.
So
nice purple.
Yeah. So they've done a lot of purple stuff in the past. I mean, most of their stuff is black and white, but they kind of have a history with it. So for a limited edition thing, like, yeah, I'm gonna do it.
That's great. That's fun. Marshall, what's going on in your world?
Oh, not much. Just the same old stuff. I did hear that Waldorf is working on a 3.0 firmware for my Quantum, which is going to make it 16 voice polyphonic, which will be cool.
Oh, about time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is, it's multi-timbral, right?
It's bitimbral, I believe. But yeah, the thing is that the Quantum has 8 polyphonic voices because the analog filters. But this update, I think, is going to make it like the Iridium, to where you can go all 16 voices digital. So they're going to expand the voice count for digital. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That's cool.
So I'm excited about that. Yeah, that's going to be cool.
Awesome, man.
It's in beta right now, I think. So just waiting for it to come out, actually come out. But they're working on it. Yep. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes. Yeah, anytime you get to upgrade your already existing synth and take it to the next level, that is exciting. It's like, oh, man, it's a new beast.
Oh, yeah.
Well, cool, man. And then Mr. Ben Jackson, introduce yourself. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and whatnot, and then what you've been up to recently.
Cool. Yeah, so the day job is mostly music production in some various form or the other. Produce a lot of indie records and mix a lot of records. So I built a studio here in Nashville on my property, which I love. And in addition to doing that, I'm in a band with Tim, and we get together and write, and we're inching to the finish line of a record. I think we're almost there. And then I've got a couple little instrumental projects that I've been working on as well. So lots of music making over here.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. Tell us a little bit more about the Great Northern.
Yeah, so that was an instrumental project I started when the studio was being built, because I was in the basement of this house we moved into with all my stuff, and I was Tim had poisoned me, and I started buying analog synths. Um, and
Good,
and
good
I didn't
job.
know I didn't know how to use them. I liked the sound of them, but I didn't really know what they all did. And so I figured the best way to do it was to just start writing music with them and figure it out. And that's kind of where that project got born out of. And luckily enough, a friend of mine had a little deal with a small kind of ambient music and healing music record label out of Arizona, and he heard the thing I did and sent it to them without me really knowing, and said, "Hey, they want to talk to you." And so they've released it, and it's out there for them to do stuff with now. But yeah, it's kind of basically was meant for me to learn how to use my instruments and compose whatever I wanted without a client or artist direction, and uh, it's really fun to do. I enjoy it.
It turned out great, and then you have a new track from the same project, but just a new release, right?
Yeah, so I've slowly been working on that release also, and I think there's 6 done and mastered, and another handful. I think they're going to do 2 EPs for it eventually, but yeah, there's a new one called Tides that just came out a week ago or so, and they're going to kind of drop a couple of singles and do that bit, and then drop the EP later. So yeah, there it is. Yeah, you get on Bandcamp or stream it or any of that stuff.
Well, before we move on, we'll just play a few snippets out of the song here. So one of the things is that ambient music is really hard to show off. But I
It
got to
is.
listen to this after you sent me the links, and it is a really gorgeous song. And I really
Thanks.
liked the sound and the textures of it, like starting with that first, those little kind of tinkles, and then it has that pad that swells in. It's like, oh, I love it.
Thanks. It was that one was that's the most like ambient static thing I've ever done, and that was kind of what I was aiming for. It started most of that pad is the Moog matriarch, and I kind of came up with that patch and some of those chords at first and recorded them and left it alone for a long time. But I wanted to do something that was really really chill, because the first record I did was like lots of busy parts, lots of layering, lots of like key
Hmm.
changes, and so it was kind of the opposite challenge of do I have the ability inside me to not do that stuff and to keep it really simple, and still build it within a really small framework. And so that was the attempt anyway. I don't know how successful it was. That'll be up to everybody else to figure out, but
I think so, and I think that's one of the things that I struggle with too. Coming from like a more traditional like rock background or something, where there you've got bridges and choruses and verses and all this, and to write really great ambient music. I love ambient music, especially when it's done with somebody who really understands tone and can really get the right sounds out of a synth. And there's always that self doubt when I do it. Like, is this going to be interesting to people? Am I doing too much or too little? And so when somebody gets that balance right, I really appreciate it.
totally, it's tough. And I mean, it's still like, it's like, okay, let's add a melody to it, because I just don't like things without melodies, because I'm coming from that same songwriter place. And like, let's do that and have a theme. Maybe I can leave it alone after that. It's kind of,
Right.
It's kind of the goal. And I was starting to tinker with the modular stuff around the same time. So like the little bell tones, I think, are from Rings, and there's a handful of things going on in there from just experimenting with those things too.
Yeah, so the thing that sort of sounds like harmonics,
Mm-hmm.
that's Rings. Well, yeah, it's great, man. Great work, and it is like a challenge to step back from the canvas without applying too much paint, and just kind of know that it can be done and be simple, and that can be great, even.
Yeah.
But that's a disciplined moment, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, for me, it's like I have to start getting comfortable with the idea. I'm never comfortable with it. I have to surrender to the idea of like, we want to do this, period, and I will accept if it sucks, as long as I do the thing I wanted to do.
oh yeah, sure, yeah, like an exercise, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's
Yeah,
I think it's turned out great, man. It's
Thanks, man.
awesome. Both releases are fantastic. I'm looking forward to hearing more from this one.
Yeah, I am as well. And just to remind people, in the description box, we've got links to Ben's work on Bandcamp and Spotify, and also his work with Tim and the Penn Jones Conspiracy. Actually, I'm not sure if that's in there yet, but I will go do that right now.
Yeah, put that in there. That's just fun.
Yeah, we've had a really great time with that band, and just being a trio, and there's not too many chefs in the kitchen, and it's pretty great. We seem to have a working method now that's just, we just get together and always crank something out. It's it's interesting, and I'm super grateful for that, because it can be just eye gouging, I'm trying to say, moments sometimes to accomplish any sort of a co-write or something. It just can be awful. And
Yep.
And the three of us by now, it's real simple, and we always come up with something that we kind of look at each other and go, well, we did something, it's good. All right, see you next time. So
Yeah, been therapy of itself for a long time now.
yeah. Hey, Paul Artola, it is Ben Jackson and myself, and we have a third, Benjamin Olson, who's our primary lyricist and vocalist, and occasional acoustic guitar player, speaking of blending electronic music with acoustic instruments. Sometimes we dare to add that element, and sometimes he doesn't want to play. Sometimes he's just like, I just want to sing, man. Come on.
Yeah, can we drag you into the booth and make you play some acoustic? Yeah.
Because it does add a cool dimension to it when that happens.
Let me play. I know we've played some of this stuff before, but
Sure.
Which would be the best track to just do 30 seconds out of?
Do Interruption. That's a good one, right?
Yeah, it's great, and it's kind of a live thing there.
I got my name on a stone, I got a smart telephone. I have a fictional friend, I have a means to an end. I got a lot of regret, I've heard there's more to come yet. I got a bad attitude, I love the shit out of you. I came to wish for better things, I'll give you a clue to what that means. Nothing is over till it's over, really. If there's a better way to go, no one should ever claim to.
Oh, wrong page here. All right, there we go.
That's
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, that'd be the conspiracy right there. It's pretty indicative of what happens, and it's just been fun, man. I mean, both of the bands are just super talented, and it's just they always bring it, And so anyway, not to get too far off on the Penn Jones Conspiracy, but what a pleasure, really, really a blast.
So is your original instrument drums? Because I notice you play drums on there.
It is, yeah, and still the primary thing most of the time, or it's at least the thing I'm the best at. I'm not sure it's the thing I play the most anymore, but it is the primary thing. Yeah.
I hope you guys do some like Chad Smith and Will Ferrell drum offs at some point.
We do have a couple of songs where Benjamin is playing like a floor tom, and then I have a mounted tom that sits inside of my little keyboard stand, and then Ben's on the drums, and so like we do have a couple of moments where there's just vocal and tribal, drums kind of happening for a while. It's pretty fun, It's just another texture you can jump to, and when you just got three guys, you got to be a little more clever about how to fill that space.
Yeah. Although it's nice with just three guys, because then you do have a lot of space to work with without having a lot of other instruments to figure out where you're going to fit in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's both the blessing and the curse, I think, for that kind of a setup.
Yeah. A different kind of power trio.
Right. Definitely.
Well, like Paul's saying, should be 2 drums and a bass.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it can get to that. It does some of that. Yeah, man. And so, Ben, what have you been up to like recently, other than your record project itself? What kind of productions are you working on?
I worked last week for 3 days mostly in a studio in downtown Nashville, over at Addiction at Kalmuski's place. As the engineer of all things, tracking, and this was a straight up country record with an 8-piece band of the Nashville session dudes, and that was super fun. They came back out here. We did vocals at night, and I've been doing a lot of co-writes with some sort of, I don't know what you call it anymore. It's like indie music. Some of it leans pop, some of it leans rock, some of it leans Americana. It's just all sort of, that vein of things, and kind of producing the tracks that we feel like are worth chasing down on that kind of stuff, which has been really awesome. So those couple of the last week's worth of stuff.
Yeah. Tell the good people, as they say, about the songwriter sessions.
Yeah, thanks, man. I would have forgotten about that. So, one of the things that was really important to me when I built my studio was trying to figure out how to make it sort of a community like building experience too, and not just have it be because it's not a commercial studio. It's really like a production studio, and I wanted it to be a good creative space for people. And so I came up with the idea to invite songwriters out and video and audio record them doing sort of some broken down acoustic songs of theirs. And so we ended up doing, when it was all said and done, 9 artists, 3 songs each for 27 music videos this spring, at no charge to the artist. And they're allowed to post the stuff and use it as content. They can take the audio and release it as acoustic singles if they want to. It's all just kind of there to get us together. It's like 3 of them a night, and get us together to hang out and show off some songs and get some content to post for your fan base, and just kind of keep the wheels moving on the independent music bus over here. So it was really fun. It was really rewarding. It was a lot of work, but it came out great. And I think we will do it again in some form or fashion, maybe with some updates, but it was awesome.
That sounds like
And
a
so
great
that's
project.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea, because it's such a win-win situation for everybody, and gives you exposure and it helps the community at the same time, and like it's just a brilliant idea, I think, and it's I don't know if this is necessarily true, but to me it feels a little bit more like like community used to be within musicians, rather than it being kind of such a separate thing. I mean, people would get together and like they would create music a lot more often, I think, maybe back when, or just get together and play for the love of it. And I feel like it's coming from that sort of spirit in a way too. And so it's just great, man. and everybody you've had on there has been they're fantastic, man. Like each one of those artists has done something very, very cool, and it's neat to hear it just stripped down like that, and just acoustic guitar, and then you're accompanying sometimes, or someone else might be.
Yeah, I think I played on a tune or two from each one of them, depending, just to kind of give it something and some flavor. But it was really sort of like the idea was, again, you don't have to pay for anything. We all need content now. It's part of the demand, and it's part of the way to reach your audience. It's through doing things like this that you reach and build an audience now. And so let me help you do that. I'll also reach people. I'll reach you guys, and we can all win. I've got the space for it, so let's just do it and see what happens. And yeah, it's been a really, really good thing. It's also on my YouTube channel on a playlist if anybody wants to check it out. And it's been funny. Most of them are, I think we have a few more weeks left, maybe through the 1st of December, of releases. There's one a week. And then a handful of them, of course, got YouTube flagged because they had already released the song and they had a pub deal, and it got taken down. But that's okay. We're just letting the ones roll that roll. And yeah, it's been awesome. The artists seem to be really into it. They get excited. So yeah, all in all, very good thing. All good things.
That's cool. What a great idea. Yeah. Well, and you could also speak to, it'd be cool to hear about your work with Sister Hazel.
Yeah. So it's been probably 7 or 8 years ago now. I started kind of subbing on drums for their drummer on some live shows. And, those guys, if anybody that doesn't know, they're sort of an alternative rock band from the, starting in the mid 90s with a bunch of hits through the early 2000s. And, we became good friends, and I started kind of working on some records, doing a lot of programming at first, and that transitioned pretty quickly into producing. And so I think I've done 5 records and a couple of singles for them now, and mixed the last couple as well. And they've started to record out here at my place, and it's been one of the most rewarding experiences as a producer that I've had, just because the guys we're all so close now, and everybody wants it to be great, and everybody, they know that they've sort of built a little community around them as well, with a lot of other artists and independent artists. And I always go back and say, if I could start making friends over again, I might just let them pick all my friends, because everybody they surround themselves with are amazing. And so that's been another really, really great experience, is to just get to work with those guys and produce a band and deal with all the things that come with producing a band. And so, yeah, that's still an ongoing thing. And it's fantastic. It's really fun.
I have a question for the both of you guys about Nashville, and I'm kind of curious, like, so I've never been to Nashville, and my conception of it, as far as like what I hear in media and stuff, is it's all country, and everybody I hear about from Nashville is pretty much some sort of country or Americana kind of sound. And you guys are really involved with synth and alternative music. So what is the scene like there for non-country styles of music, or how conducive is it to making alternative music there?
You want to field that one, Ben?
Sure. You just got to finish your gig before the pitchforks get there. No, it's become, man, it has been wild to see how drastically that has changed. And I feel like that change was pretty well underway when I got here in 2006 or so. And it's just exploded. So now there's a huge indie rock scene. The electronic scene is just starting to sort of boom out, and we're starting to see more and more of that. There's some communities growing for that. Even the jazz scene has started to really take off in the last 5 years. And so, yeah, I think it's become much more a creative hub for musicians and less centered around a single genre. That genre is still huge here, and it's a big part of a lot of our careers. But there's just so much going on now. I think the indie rock scene might be as active or more active locally than the country scene is in places nowadays. I don't know, Tim, what's your perception of that?
Yeah, I would say that's right. It's definitely vying for that same position, and has been for a while, really. The truth is, because it is Music City, and because of um, the incredible musicians that have come here, it's the talent that is in this town is crazy, and so many non-country icons even have moved here. There's just a cool vibe about it, and because of all this super high level of musicianship that does exist, whether or not it gets used for country, it has to seep out into something. And so a lot of times, I think a lot of these musicians, they have tons of side projects that are anything but country music. Their kind of singer songwriter idea, what they might want to do, indie and alternative and synth wave or what have you. So it's really made the town explode in a lot of ways. And yeah, our jazz, we actually have like a viable jazz scene now, which is pretty new. Like I kind of wanted that to be here when I first moved here, but wasn't really happening. But that has changed so much. So it's the whole town has changed so much. It's crazy. There's a lot more people, but because of that, the diversity has really amped up, and definitely in a positive way. So yeah, it's not what you would think. I mean, there's plenty of that. There's plenty of what you would guess, from country and any kind of work that you could get from that. But because there's just a lot of incredibly talented people, it starts to manifest itself in different ways. So I feel like our diversity, if anything, is just grown leaps and bounds. It's really very cool, and I'm proud of this town actually for doing that, because I've been here since 1996. Yeah, 96 is when I moved. So it was not this town then. It was what you were thinking, Chris. It was primarily that.
Well, and you're hearing it in the music that comes out now too, and I don't think that's talked about a lot. There's a lot of people now noticing that you're hearing 808s and Junos in radio, top 100 country music, right?
Yeah.
It's that's wow. Where is that coming from? It's coming from because those writers and those artists are surrounded by musicians that are doing other things besides traditional country music with traditional instrumentation. And like the Americana scene takes a lot of cues from like the Wilcos and the Jack Whites and the indie rock stuff. I think Cage the Elephant's here now. I know Jack White's been here a long time, and so you start to hear it all sort of bleed into even the genres that have been here a long time, and that's exciting too. All of it's kind of really interesting to watch it grow.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Nashville, it does, when you think about music cities, it is one of the first that come up on the list, at least in my head, because there are much bigger cities that have very established music scenes like Los Angeles and New York and Berlin. But, to consider Nashville has really, I mean, with something like Los Angeles or New York, their reputations are for many different things, movies and television, all this. But when it comes to Nashville, the first thing you think of is music. And so it's kind of interesting to hear how those influences are spreading back and forth. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, so I think it's all a good thing.
Keep it down, Marshall.
Sorry, guys. Sorry.
You're acting up again, man.
I'm way too loud. Sorry. Put on everyone.
Marshall, man, what have you been up to? Let's talk about, I know you're working continuously, basically, for the last little bit on your live set, and
it's just taking.
How's that coming?
Taking a long time. I want it to be really good, so I'm doing everything I can to do my best on it, and that takes time. So, and it's a whole new workflow for me, new like that setup and is really great. But it also means that because of the flexibility that's there, like I don't want to necessarily be locked into just like a straight set. In other words, like the song is there and I have to stick to the actual total arrangement. I want to be able to have some nuance with the live performance part of it. And so just making sure all that stuff's there and that I've got all the controls mapped out correctly, and then the sound design and then the composition. I mean, it's a huge undertaking, but it's going to be really good. It's sounding really good.
Yeah, because I mean, you're having to teach yourself a new way of doing things, and you're building in some compositional variation, right, into the your ability to improvise a little bit, basically. So
yeah, and that's the fun part of that whole side of it for me, because traditionally I've just done work in the DAW and just create a composition, mix it, master it, and send it out. So doing this it's fun because you get to have a performance there. Like there's nuance to it, and yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that's a different application of like you're stretching yourself basically.
Yeah. Yep.
To figure out some new and keeping it fresh for you. That's cool.
Yeah.
I've made myself this little live rig back here, and it's just it's mainly run by machine, and hopefully that's going to be successful, because the first time I took it out, it was a major crash and burn, and nothing happened. Like I literally played, 16 seconds.
I don't know. I have video I can send.
Yeah.
It's on the internet.
It's amazing. It was so humiliating, but you just get up, off the ground and dust yourself, off and get back on the horse, man, because it's like, no, I can do this. I don't know what happened, but I'm going to figure that out, and then we're going to do this. So yeah, I'm just kind of feeling that too, Marshall. Like it's just a blast to kind of build a live set, and the gratification that you get with that is quite different than putting something out and then you just know it's sort of out there in space.
Yeah, and I think there's something a little more special when you do it live. You know what I mean? It's cool to listen to great music too, but it's really awesome when it's done live. And doing live electronic music is not something you see very often. That's done. How do I say this? Like a continuous thing. Like my idea is to have like a good 30 minutes to an hour or so worth of music it's continuously flowing, but the changes are drastic between tracks, but to still have everything fit together like a mixed trance record. That's kind of the idea, but doing all that live, I've never seen that done before, and that's what I'm trying to do basically.
That will be really cool. Yeah. And that's a lot of challenge just to keep the transitions happening, right? That's probably one of the biggest.
Yeah.
Well, and finding ways to transition between the tracks smoothly. It's a lot of stuff, and instead of just sitting down and writing one track, I'm writing however many there's going to be to fill that time. So it's a lot of work, because like I could sit and write one track and it'll take me 30 hours to do everything.
Yeah.
So, and then doing that times however many, like 8 or 9 or however many I end up fitting in there, that's a lot of effort.
Yeah, but that's going to be so cool, and like you said, like it's who else is doing that really?
Yeah. There's not. I've never seen anyone do what I'm trying. Well, I think there is one guy, but I don't know exactly how he's got a couple of what are those little era Roland System 1s. Mm-hmm. And he kind of goes around, and I don't know all what he's got going on, like if he's doing a lot of stuff through Ableton or whatnot, but I don't know if I'd consider that the same thing either,
Right. I get it, yeah. Your approach is different for sure, and more challenging, but also like I think it'll be cooler.
Yeah, and just having those amazing synths all up there, and they're all doing stuff. That's cool. That's not just a computer,
What are you doing to build the transitions? Like, how does that work for you? What have you found that's working?
So I'm still working on that. I'm just working on the best workflow to get that to work how I want. but I'm thinking I'm just gonna have to trigger different sets of percussion and things like that, and have like I'm using this thing called Blue Arp. It's a piece of hardware. It was started as software, but it's a piece of hardware, and it's basically really advanced arpeggiator / sequencer, and that's all the synths are connected to that, and then I'm running drums and percussion through Ableton, and it's just a whole thing. So once I get it all sorted out, I'll probably do some videos on that too, kind of explaining how it's all working, because it's a little difficult, and I haven't got all the bugs worked out of it yet either. So
yeah, man, once you land on your working method, though, definitely like put out a bunch of videos on that. That would be really interesting to see,
Yeah, for sure.
Give away all your secrets, man.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not doing anything that's impossible. So, and I can, I don't have any problem. I know some people they want to sit on certain things, but I'm not like that. I'd definitely share everything if anyone ever wanted to know about it. That's the thing, So
yeah.
It's probably so complicated that it's a lot of work to chase you down to do it anyway.
And it's one of those things where some of it you can demonstrate, but it may take a while for somebody to really understand what's going on. It's pretty technical, and it's a lot of routing with MIDI and different patterns, and then I'm going to be doing automated adjustments to things within Ableton, because the synths are set, right? I'm going to have 7 or 8 synths live, and because of that, when you switch over to different tracks, you're going to use different sounds on those instruments. So programming in program changes, but then in Ableton, you got to adjust the mix then, right? So like your EQ settings, maybe you want different delays or effects and things so I'm going to have to automate all that stuff in Ableton as well.
Yep. Totally know exactly what you mean. At least you can in Ableton. You are able to do all that.
Yep. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
Well, and really, you're not really giving anything away. Yeah, it's funny because some people do get extra precious about their process, and to some extent, I kind of get that. But mostly, no, because you could show somebody a diagram specifically of what you have, and they're still not going to do the same thing that you do or come up with the same stuff that you do. And so,
that's the thing. Like, I've got my own kind of style, I think, and
totally
that's going to be imprinted on whatever I do. And somebody could copy that style anyways. You see that all the time. Anyone who gets famous or popular, there's a lot of people copycatting kind of what they do. And people are smart, man. They'll figure it out, and they don't need you necessarily to tell them what you're doing. Now with that, like, the setup is the fancy part, right? That's the part that's might need some explaining, but
to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And that's a good point about it. It's always the personality and style of the music that makes the most important difference in that. And I think, with most guitars have a much, or drummers for that matter, have a much simpler setup compared to doing all this yourself with synthesizers and having an hour set. I mean, there's, a lot of guys back in the day, they would turn the Marshal on and they'd run their hand across the top of the knobs just to turn everything up, and then just play on one pickup, and that was it. Like, so, people copying other people, but it's still your style that really makes the big difference. And, it's like when I think about something like two-handed tapping as a technique on guitar, it's like, well, there's people that are just incredible and have just taken it to a whole nother level, but nobody's ever going to be as classic or as musical to me as Eddie Van Halen was, so.
Well, and in a way, I am kind of jealous of the people that can listen to stuff and figure it out. Like, that's pretty cool, because sometimes I listen to stuff and I'm like, I don't know how they did that or how they programmed that sound. Like, I don't know how they got all that,
Mm-hmm.
There's people that figure it out. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's some dedication to digging. But that's, what a great thing to do, though. Really, like, you learn so much when you force yourself to, like, all right, I'm going to try to figure out what's happening here, and you don't know, and all of a sudden, even if you don't get to that thing, you may accidentally discover something else just from digging, right? Like digging down in there and finding something. So
And I know with synths, because that's pretty much all I use is synths and drum machines and stuff like that. But looking at how when you get a good set of patches, either if you purchase them or the synth just has a good set, figuring out how those sounds are made on that piece of hardware is extremely helpful, I think. So if you take the time to go back through and kind of figure out the settings that they've got, it can teach you a lot.
yeah, absolutely. And giving yourself a goal to have to push through, because you might not just want to sit there and learn the mechanics only,
Right.
but if you're applying those mechanics right away to some music, and now you have context for why you're learning all this crap, and then it makes sense. And that's definitely what I have done with my rig, is just bought modules that seem to do something interesting or synths, and then just start trying to make some music out of it, just like what Ben's talking about. It's just a way to learn gear and improve your skills, and then also have something at the end of the day to show for it.
Yeah.
And some of it is because musicians are so individual in the way that we do things, that when you're trying to learn a technique or a style of one of your heroes, it can often lead you not to the same place, but something that is kind of an offshoot of that. And I mean, to go back to my example about Eddie Van Halen and tapping, I mean, he kind of came up with that whole thing because he was listening to Led Zeppelin's Heartbreaker, and Jimmy Page was doing this, 2-fret thing off of an open string in the middle of a solo, and he's like, well, how's he doing that? And he figured it out. It's like, well, what if I moved the nut and then made my finger the nut, and then was doing the same thing, these hammer-ons and pull-offs. Oh, but what if this is awkward? What if I just did this then? And then he started doing it, and that was his tapping technique, and it was derived from a song that you would never have guessed that those were connected. And so I think it can be that way with a lot of techniques and a lot of things that if we sit and I don't think it's a good thing to be slavishly, just copy your heroes and have everything that they have and just play only their songs. I think that's kind of a dead end. But I think there is a lot of, it helps a lot to spend some time with a few of your heroes and learning their music to kind of find out what was in their mind, how do they do that, what are these techniques, because it kind of gets you out of your own routines and it may spark something new with it.
That's exactly right. If this story is correct, or if I'm telling it correctly, Larry Graham, who invented kind of popping and slapping on the bass, right? Mm-hmm. That's him. And he did it because he was in a band and he couldn't be heard.
Yeah.
So it was strictly strictly a way to play louder. So he started using his thumb. So I mean, there you go. There it is. It's just wow. Trying something different, and now it's not that it's cool to do that anymore, really, but that's an entire style unto himself that he created. That's pretty impressive. Because he couldn't be heard.
And then so many people took that style. I mean, he's got the classic, slap and pop style, but to think the other different places that people went that weren't just straight copies of him, somebody like Victor Wooten or something that just took that and is varying the technique and changing it and making his own. And now all of a sudden you're seeing these guys do all these kind of crazy stuff, mixing things like flamenco guitar and pop and slap, and you're getting this whole thing that's something totally other, but it's like technology building one thing, building upon another.
Very cool. Well, you guys shall we ease into our actual main topic at this point? You want to do that, or you want to just keep splashing around? Because we can do whatever. It's our show, damn it, we can do whatever. Yeah, okay, let's do it. So this is a great notion, topic rather, because thinking of combining electronic instruments with acoustic instruments and then blurring the lines between them, This is actually Mr. Ben Jackson's topic here. So let's jump into it. Ben, I want to kind of get your thoughts on why you thought that'd be a good topic, and talk about it, man.
Cool. I guess it's kind of what I've been chasing a little bit with the synth stuff lately. And it's probably has a lot to do with what I do most of the time for work, producing, songwriter based music in Nashville, which, though it's not often country, it is very frequently vocal and guitar based. And then sort of the synth element, and I've been really interested in trying to sort of find creative and interesting ways to incorporate and sneak in things from both sides onto the other thing. And that's kind of led me down the modular rabbit hole and some of the granular rabbit hole and exploring. And so, yeah, I just thought it'd be kind of a cool thing to get you guys thoughts and experience on, as well as share some of my basic preliminary findings. But I just think it's fascinating. I think it's one of the things it's sort of next level to me to be able to put the two things together, but then especially if you can do it in a way that makes it a little bit hard to identify where one thing ends and the other thing begins. And that's kind of where I think the sweet spot might be a lot of the time.
So kind of basically using, especially from the standpoint of blending electronic with acoustic, you're blending it in a different way than, say, here's a damn filter sweep,
Right.
You're not doing the cliche use of what a synth would be in a band. You're just making it its own instrument, right? And then just finding parts.
Right. So like a couple examples on that, a good place that it worked well. It's been working well for the last couple of years. I've been using my Moog Subsequent 37 a lot on tracks in places it shouldn't go, and to the artist's delight. I've got some patches that I've made now with usually running through some delay and reverb and enough glide, and it's usually kind of triangle wave based. And so what ends up happening is it sort of becomes a steel guitar with a very different timbre, and that works great on a lot of modern Americana, indie stuff, even country stuff. People have really liked it, and so that's actually happening on some of those East End songwriter sessions where it's just an acoustic guitar and the singer, and then me on that thing as the other texture. And it's great, and it blends perfectly. And that was kind of there was a moment when we were filming that where two of my good songwriter friends were on the couch back there, and we were in the live room doing it. And I think that thing doesn't come in until maybe the second verse or second chorus. And when it did, I saw these two songwriters that are always acoustic guitar songwriters both stand up at the same time and approach the window to see what is that, and immediately both of them were like, hey, can you do that on mine when we do this thing? And I'm like, that's what we're going for. And so from the synth side of things, doing things like that, but also taking acoustic or electric guitar, organic instruments, right, and trying to run them through some of the samplers and loopers and synth things to sort of maybe play them a little bit more like a synth and play the synth a little bit more like an organic instrument, and see again if you can sort of blur the line and make it a little bit more feel like an organic performance, but give them a sound they haven't heard before.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And then when you take it to when you take some nice samples and then you put them into granular synthesis, and you start doing all kinds of chopping up with the waveforms and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, you get some really cool stuff, I think.
Totally. It's cool. I mean, I just mostly work on sort of organic styles of music most of the time. Again, it's all songwriter based, whatever genre that happens to fall under. And so it's probably also just an excuse for me to be able to use my toys on that stuff. But I do think it's interesting. I think it has a lot that these other instruments have a lot to add, and it's kind of time to fuse some of those things together. But yeah, the granular thing's really cool because you can get sort of that, an acoustic guitar timbre, but chop it up in a synthy way. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of a lot of gigs I played where there wasn't a keyboard player, it got me starting to think about how can I cover some different textural space. And so he's always played lead guitar, and with having a pedal board and thinking about things like, man, this would be a nice song for like a really nice synth pad, but we don't have a synth player. And starting to utilize the gear that you have. So, especially like on a Strat, like a pinky swelling the volume control so that you have, you're basically doing like a slow attack for a VCA, from a synth, and then you'd swell it into, whatever you want. So like a lot of times I would just have some like chorus and delay and reverb, and swell it in like that. Like you get a really nice synth pad sound. It's very ambient sounding. And if you have shimmer reverb, then it sounds really like a synthesizer, because there are some, synthetic elements available in it there. And it was one of the techniques that was able to use with great success. And a lot of times people would come up afterwards and like, where was the keyboard stuff coming from? Like, oh, I just did that on the guitar. And so for an environment like, well, we don't have that, but there are some stylistic things from another instrument that could be borrowed. That was a fun thing for me to do from that direction. I know that keyboardists have been doing it from the other direction for quite a long time as well.
Yeah, that's cool. I think one of the things that sounds really fresh in a modern production is using a pad that's built from a non-standard source and creating a pad out of it and having that in the background. I think that's really like that, at least for me, that perks my ears up every time. I'm like, wow, the way that's lifting the track up is really neat, and it's not just A, B, C, or D normal choice. It's like, wow, that is cool. So it's interesting, like, obviously, Cryss, the way you're kind of creating a pad by just doing volume swells and use of delay and verb and whatever. Anything like that is cool, but like especially now that we can do granular type stuff, and we can use all these tools and really make something interesting happen that's still musical, for the love of God, instead of just.
Not just about the leaps and bloops.
I just, I just, it's funny like how many knob twiddlers there are, and it's fun, it's gratifying, it's great, but like I still have to have something I can sink my teeth into that's some sort of music. I mean, I think all four of us are that way. But that's a thing for me, like melodic.
I wonder, because I'm just thinking, in the time I grew up, there was already synthesizers, and they kind of grew in popularity through my youth and growing up. And so the point that, like, when I started playing guitar, I knew what a synthesizer was and kind of had some vague conception about, what these electronic keyboards were for. But, discovering synthesizers, not from bands like Kraftwerk or Tangerine Dream, as great as those bands were, it was like the more progressive rock bands of the 60s and 70s, particularly the British ones that were my favorites, that all of a sudden were using these synthesizers. And, so we've kind of hit on a couple different things, like taking instruments and finding ways to play them differently, as you guys were talking about, or to mingle them in different ways and take acoustic elements and make them into some sort of synthetic thing, and vice versa. But there was kind of an interesting thing that I liked when I started playing guitar. I listened to a lot of classic rock and some metal, and the metal stuff I listened to did not have any keyboards in it. But of the classic rock stuff, to have something that was, primarily a rock band instrument song, and then all of a sudden you had something in it that came in with synthesizer, I'm thinking like Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Lucky Man. I mean, that blew my mind, listening to it, because it's this, acoustic guitar, drums, and singing kind of song. And all of a sudden, this Moog modular comes in, and it's not doing anything realistic, as in terms of modeling other instruments. It's like, here is a fat square wave and lots of reverb, and we're just going to go for it, and that kind of thing. And I like that kind of off the wall, just, no, this is not going to fit in any sort of way, but it's going to be awesome. And I've always kind of liked that.
Yeah. Man, I just heard that track about 3 days ago or so, and I hadn't heard it in forever. And that very thing you're talking about, just the impression of when it first comes in, he kind of brings it in low, and then not volume wise, but like frequency wise, like note choice wise, he's kind of low down on it, and then it just sort of slowly builds. But it was so much fun to like hear it again. I have such a different appreciation, I guess, for it now, and just the impact of that. Right? Yeah, it's no apologies. I am a damn synthesizer right here in the center of this mix right now, and it's great. Like, it works so cool. No wonder that was a hit like that, because it's, what is that?
Yeah, and it was the perfect tone for it too. And then even like his choice, I know Keith Emerson was not happy with the take that happened, but I think it was brilliant. His bandmates obviously thought that was a brilliant take, because I kept it. But even like to mirror the lyrics in it, and that it's it sounds like it's supposed to be a happy song, what a lucky man he was, and this kind of stuff. And the solo starts off with this very happy, major key, whatever it is, D major or something, thing. And it's like kind of lyrical and jolly and that kind of stuff. And then towards the end of the solo, you're hearing more reverb, and all of a sudden he goes into minor, and it's just like, it's dark, and you're just left with that starkness. And I think that was the perfect instrument to create that vibe for the song. It's like, I can't imagine it. I mean, I love guitar solos, but I couldn't imagine a guitar solo in that song that would do it as well as Keith Emerson did on that Moog.
Totally agree. And yeah, he does go dark with it, and it gets more washed out, and he starts doing those resonance sweeps, and it's just like, wow. It's really, it's it sounds dated in a way, but like, you got to remember at the time that was mind blowing.
Oh yeah, some of that stuff, it stuck in my mind. Whereas, in like, say, my teen years, like, there was all sorts of synthy stuff on the radio, but it was forgettable to me. But when I heard that, or when I heard Pete Townshend's work on, like, Who's Next or something, or the some of the Moog stuff on Abbey Road, and of course, all over Pink Floyd, I was so fascinated, because I knew what the rock stuff was. I understood it. And all of a sudden there's this other foreign element in it that was just made it so memorable, because it stood out. And I think, like what Ben was saying about the people he was working with, all of a sudden going to the window, like, what is that? That's that kind of moment. I know what that is, because that's the moment that's the same kind of thing that I felt when I heard, Welcome to the Machine or Lucky Man or something. And those guys, like, running, like, what the hell is going on here? That's awesome.
Yeah, anywhere that can get stuff that catches people's attention in a good way. And one way to do that is to put something in a track that might not normally be in that kind of track, right? And but yeah, I mean, you mentioned Pink Floyd, and I really didn't get into them for the longest time, but listening more the last several years, as I've gotten into more of this, it's like they did an amazing job of blending, like what we're talking about. Like, everything feels like it's glued together, and all was conceived to be one sound, and that's where, like, the real sweet spot is to me. I mean, even stuff like, the things where you're going, yeah, that's a synth, or even the fun stuff like the Cars or whatever, super great. Like, amazing and great writing. I mean, it still comes down to whether the song's any good or not, right? Uh, but but yeah, like the Floyd stuff was really cool because it did sort of have like a cohesive texture, and you weren't always sure where one thing ended and the other thing began. You know, it was really cool.
I think some of it may owe to them in that they, let me put out like this. I mean, they had a drummer, they had guitarist, singer, they had bassist, and they had a keyboard player, and if you will, a piano and organ player specifically. And then when it came to synthesizers for that band, it was like that thing that was, I mean, we would regard a synthesizer as like, oh, that belongs to the keyboard player, right? And for that band, it didn't really. I mean, Richard would play the synth parts live, and I'm sure he tracked a lot of his stuff. But so many of the photos from the studio, it's the three of them, Roger Waters, David Gilmour, and Richard Wright, all creating stuff. And some of the most famous Pink Floyd synth parts were created by Roger and Dave, which is crazy. But it was almost this type of thing where, okay, well, there's this other unique instrument and none of us own it. It's like a collective band type thing, so we can all contribute to it. And maybe that's what kind of pushed him to do so well with it. I don't know what the internal workings of the band and their personalities were, other than I love their music and it's probably one of my favorite bands. But, I think that was one of those things where it felt like, oh, we can all kind of have a part at this. And I feel that too, like in the stuff that Marshall, Tim, and I have done where, we kind of come from it, in a way, Marshall is like the Richard Wright where, he's the keyboard player, he's a synthesist, first, and Tim and I have been guitarist and drummer first, and we come to synthesizer, and there's that place where we're collaborating and we can kind of like play with that a little bit more than some of the other parts.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy, and that is true. Yeah. Well, we're working on a little theme for the show, Cryss and Marshall and myself. Just a little, 60-second thing that we'll probably do an edit of, and then also have a longer version. But just to have a little bumper music front and back, it's fun, and we just thought it'd be a chance for us to throw something together. So yeah, Marshall has led us off with that, and we're working on it. But I just overdubbed some live hi-hats on it, just to give it a, because it's program kick and snare, but with some live hats, just to give it a little more grease, because I can't play that precisely.
To me, that's the coolest thing. Like, I can go to you guys and like, it's like, can we add a little bit of this? Because you guys have some of that gear, I don't have any live stuff other than, these synths. So, asking for some tom fills or, some different guitar here and there or something, like, it's really cool to be able to do that because I've never been able to do that. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. That's true. Like, you can kind of go, wait, if I have an idea, I bet one of those guys could do it. Like, that's pretty fun, Let's see.
And we were talking. So you guys were talking about some of the bands and stuff that done some interesting stuff. For me, like growing up in high school in like the late '90s, I was really into like the industrial rock stuff. So I liked like Stabbing Westward and Gravity Kills and some of these other bands from then that used programmed drums. They might have done some live stuff too, but we're using some drum machines and some synths and stuff, and they were doing like kind of hard rock. You know what I mean? I wouldn't call it metal, but it was really unique, and I thought it was really cool. And that style, I've always liked that because it's a good combination. It sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even like Nine Inch Nails and the way that they use like harder edged, I mean, oh my God, it's so impactful. It's so impactful if you do it right.
Well, there was kind of a trend in the 90s too of programmed drums, probably picking up off of like kind of sample drums of hip hop, but once it hit kind of the alternative scene. I mean, that's to me, that's one of the defining sounds of the 90s, is that you would have like kind of a alternative rock song with a female singer or something, and then you'd have that drum beat that would just go through the whole song, like no fills or anything.
Yeah.
It was just that kind of that program stuff. Now, I mean, the industrial stuff that I listened to was a lot more intricate in that regard.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, a lot of
It
a lot
wasn't just
of
the same
crossover.
loop for 4.5 minutes or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
There's a performance there too.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, of our doing our theme song, Ben, you've got that collection of concert toms, single-headed toms.
I do.
I might have to pull a favor somehow.
Yeah. Stop in for a visit.
And stop in for a visit and just put some fills down in that thing, because those things.
That's my fault.
They sound so good. We set them up and used them on a couple of Penn Jones songs that we've been tracking over the past few weeks. Man, they just sound great. They just have a whole different vibe with the single-headed thing, and they're kind of dead, and it's just like, there's that sound. It's very much in the air tonight.
It's
those
barking
toms.
at you. Yeah.
You can just tell immediately, concert toms. Right.
Yeah.
So that might be cool
awesome.
for the track. I don't know. Something to think about.
Yeah.
We'll see.
No, totally, man.
I'll have to try to work that out with you, Ben. We'll see.
Yeah. I think that idea though is cool to do, like that, even blending up and mixing them up at that, micro level maybe of having a drum kit represented partially by electronic programmed elements and partially by acoustic elements, but be one cohesive drum kit performance. Like that's cool too, and it's something that I don't think to do most of the time. And then we'll sample blend in, we'll fade in some of that, the electronic stuff with the acoustic stuff, or layer them in. But yeah, I mean, sometimes just to totally like go, hey, this is electronic kick and snare, but organic toms, cymbals, and hat is like, that stuff's cool. Again, it gives it just a little bit of a kind of like, wait a minute, changes the feel and the sound and all that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound cookie cutter. You know what I mean? It's not like just taking an 808 or a 909 and just laying down some loops there. It's got and Tim, you did a great job with those hi-hats, man. I can't wait till everyone can hear what we're working on and thinking it's sounding really good.
It's going to be cool. Yeah, it's definitely got it feels like a movie trailer a little bit to me. I mean, it feels like bumper music like that, like it should, right? Like it should immediately hit and go through some changes and do some stuff and be interesting, because it's a 60-second statement. It has to has to happen pretty quick. You don't have time to develop it too far. So it's fun. It just kind of turns on a dime, I think, in a few places, or we'll see, where it lands, right? But
well, and like to totally nerd out on that idea for a second, there's a handful of records. I know there's one, I'm blanking on the band name, that I just was talking to someone about, that they use this technique where they would it was a live drum performance, but in order to reduce cymbal bleed and really make the drums punchy but still sound roomy, they would reamp the close mics of the drums through a PA in the room live as the drummer was playing, and so the PA's blasting the close mics into the room mics louder than the drum kit can be, and that's how they're controlling sort of the cymbal level versus the close mic level, and it gets this super, super punchy rock sound. And I almost wonder if you could do something similar with amping running your programmed kick snare through a PA while the other pieces of the kit were playing organically, so that the cohesive element is that it's all getting into your room mics and it's all getting into your ambient mics. Again, kind of blurring that line even further of going, it sounds like an electronic snare drum, but it sounds like it's in the same room that the organic toms do. Stuff like that, I think it's a huge pain in the ass, but I think it's probably worth chasing down sometimes,
Oh man, maybe it is kind of a pain in the ass, but that's just fun. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Trying techniques like that and getting some decent and interesting and usable, hopefully, results. God, that's That's just the best, man.
Yeah.
Like I love that idea. We should try that.
Yeah, that's going on the docket right now.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's
One
the
of the things
bit
that's
right there.
kind of been inspirational for me is, getting something that's like not in your bag of tricks, really. And one of my best friends listens to a lot of electronic music. He's not a musician, but at one point we were on a road trip, and so it was basically, hey, you program a few hours of music and I'll program a few hours of music, and we'll kind of show each other some different styles. So, okay, that's cool. Well, one of the things that I realized that he liked, and I had asked him about it, I thought it was so interesting, is that so he was listening to this electronic music, but a lot of the songs had acoustic elements in it, and in particular slide guitar. And so they're, just, happening modern electronic track, and then there'd be like this like kind of real bluesy slide guitar riffs and that kind of stuff. And I always thought that was very interesting. And at some point a little bit later, I had got this, it's a 1955 Fender lap steel, and it's got the case and the legs and all that for it. And so, to me, well, lap steel, that's we're edging close to country there. And
Yeah, you're ready to go to Nashville now, man.
Right.
yeah. And I was not ready to go to Nashville with country. And so I had this thing for a little while, and I did the like very traditional like C6 tuning. I was like, I don't like any of the kind of music that's played with that. It's like I'm not really into that slack key and Hawaiian and country music and that kind of stuff. And when I went on forums, it was like all old country guys that were like very very much the gatekeeper kind of musicians, like, oh, you can only do it this way. I'm like, well, all right, I'm done there. And then I realized as I was, interesting enough, as I was listening to Pink Floyd, I'm like, oh, hey, there's a slide. I went and tracked it down, like, oh, he's using a lap steel. Like David Gilmour used a lot, lap steel quite a few places. And then these ideas all kind of were stewing for a while. I didn't really do anything about it. And then I started making tracks. And I think one of the first tracks I did with this was this very much like what my friend showed me, which was like electronic music, but with this, instead of the Hawaiian or country sounding lap steel, it was very much in the bluesy realm, because that's where I would feel a lot more comfortable, and I like the kind of darkness of it. And so I started trying to figure out ways where I've got this great classic instrument. How can I start fitting this in places? And also it's going to make me learn it and use it more, because it's not the thing that I'm just going to sit down and spend some time enjoying playing. I'm going to play a guitar or a synth or something. But that's been one of the things, like knowing that it's in my collection, then I start thinking about ways like, is this a possibility for this track? And the most recent use of it was with Brian Oliva of Gethsemane Music. And so, he does all electronic stuff. It's all Moogs. And so, hey, let's do a track together. I thought, hey, this would be a great opportunity, because it was kind of in a bit of a Pink Floyd vein. And I pulled this out and got to use it. And I think it turned out pretty well. And it was just fun to be able to use something that I love, but I don't really have a ton of use for. So when I get to do it, it's fun. And I think the next thing I need to do is experiment more with, I've been very conventional about the sounds, other than I'm, playing it a little bit overdriven, but lots of reverb and delay. And native VS. So yeah, another big influence as far as for me for slide would be Daniel Lanois, and his pedal steel stuff is. And what's funny is when I was on the forums, is that all these country guys, like when somebody new would come in and say, hey, I really want to learn, lap or pedal steel, and I've been listening to Daniel Lanois. Oh, it would just piss these guys off. It would just rile them up. Like, that's kids' music. I don't even understand why he has one of those. That's just awful. But the ambient music that he makes with a lap steel, it was, and again, one of those things where, a pedal steel, it's like pedal steel. I mean, lap steel. You're still thinking like, well, this could be a little bit more of a blues or a Hawaiian thing, but like you get the pedal steel, and you're like, oh, no, that's got to be a country thing or bluegrass or something. And then there's Daniel Lanois doing these like beautiful things where he's running into a Vox AC30 with his vintage delay units and stuff, old classic digital delays from the 80s, and the sound that he gets out of it is just mesmerizing.
Yeah, he does use it brilliantly. There's no doubt about it. It's really a textural treat when you hear that. You're like, dude. And yeah, man, I'm with you, Chris. I mean, especially with lap steel like that, one of my favorite kind of vibes that can come out of that thing is kind of a psychedelic Delta blues. Because it's a little off. It's got a little bit of a hit of some kind of weed, and it's just something. It's just a little sideways, but it's really interesting, and you identify it with blues right away, so that part kind of roots it, and yeah. That's fantastic. But hey man, like, be inventive and use the instrument different. Like, come on, that's great that Daniel Lanois does that. And whatever, with gatekeepers like that, there's always going to be those guys, and there's kind of a need for that in a way, because you do have to sort of protect some traditional stuff. I think that's, that's American music. Like, it's one of our musics is, jazz and blues and country, and like that's American, man. So like, I get that it's important and you want to protect it in a way. You want to curate it in a way too, but yeah, also turn it on its head. Why not?
Look, a question that I had, maybe put out there. So, like when we're thinking about mixing instruments, I mean, for a lot of our conversation, we've been talking about things that we have or can do. And so like I can pull out a lap steel, guitar, bass. I can play a little bit of drums. Like, I'm not that great. Anything with strings I can get on and pretty much figure out. I had my buddy's electric mandolin here a few months ago, and was like already, okay, I think I got this thing figured out now, and I can start creating some stuff with it. Okay, that's all great. And if we have that in our belt of tool belt, to be able to draw from, that's wonderful. But if we're kind of coming at from the other side as electronic musicians, and we want to, or rock musicians or whatever, and we wanting to reach into areas of acoustic instruments that are not within, we either don't own or don't play, cellos, violins, French horns, all that kind of stuff. How do you guys go about doing that?
So I use sound libraries. So because I like to add orchestral elements sometimes to some of the stuff I do. So you were saying cellos and stuff, like yeah, and I love the sound of the cello. So I'll use sound libraries. That's pretty much the only way I have to access sounds like that. But there's some really great sound libraries out there now too, which is good.
What's a go?
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask Marshall, what's a go-to library for you?
So I'm still working with my East-West Symphonic Orchestra sound library. And I also have their Ministry of Rock, which is got some different variations of guitars that I've done some stuff with before.
Nice.
And that's pretty much it. I used to have the Motu. I still have it, but it doesn't work on anything anymore because it's old. But it was the Motu.
Symphonic instrument?
Symphonic instrument, yeah. They broke that at some point, or Pro Tools did, or something, and I could never get it to work again. But that thing had some cool sounds in it too, but it wasn't as diverse as something like the East-West Library, which is massive. They've even got different mic positions and stuff you can adjust in that and everything, so you can layer stuff up really big. And to me, it sounds like real orchestra.
Yeah, like in a track, it's great, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you need some strings and stuff, or you need some of those orchestral type elements. It works great. And I know I think Contact has some stuff too, but, I don't know for sure. And even the East West library I have is like 10 years old, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So there's some newer stuff out there, I'm sure, that's probably better than even that.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you use sampling, Marshall, in your, so thereby integrating, acoustic or organic instruments.
So if I'm sampling, it's either going to be a vocal, or I'm going to take something like the speak and spell thing that I have down there that's circuit bent and sample that in. I'll do stuff like that. But in terms of actual instruments, I don't have anything else. So I I haven't actually recorded live instruments ever before.
Well, and that's one of the great things about making music in 2022 is that we have access to all this stuff. I mean, when I first started, well, I don't think when I first started doing well, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I was using a Roland Rompler for some other sounds like strings and stuff back in the mid 90s, and I mean that was my first experience with it. Like, I can create music with strings in it, and all I had at home were guitars and bass, and so that kind of blew my mind. But a little bit later, when I really got into DAW recording in the early 2000s, it was like I have at my hand like all sorts of stuff, not just like string sounding synth pads or whatever, but actually could do horn arrangements and things like that, which kind of blew my mind that it could be able to do that. And I can't play anything on a trumpet.
Right.
And
yeah, some of those brass sounds can really help a track,
Yep. I just did this was for a work project, and there needed to be a horn arrangement done on it, and long story short, my regular horn arranger was not available to take care of that for me, and so I ended up doing it because I kind of knew what I wanted, but I don't write for horns, and certainly not since college, and I don't remember all the articulations and how to, like, I can't send them parts and have them do it, but I was able to use whatever library I've got from Native Instruments to write the part, because I can hear the articulations and kind of know what to do, and then send them basically a sheet without those articulations and say, hey, is this enough for you guys to get it done? And they're like, yeah, absolutely, this is great,
Nice. Yeah.
Perfect. And so, yeah, I mean, those tools can be used for all kinds of stuff, and yeah, I mean, they sounded so good, it was tempting to kind of use them for the track, but it's still nice to have the real guys do the real thing, and kept me from having to clean up all the programming. But yeah, I mean, I like taking those sound libraries, or like loop library stuff, of performed parts, and now I'm kind of getting really into throwing those into the Instruos looper or Morphogene or some of the modular things, and then triggering, with CV, with gates, rhythmic parts out of stuff, so it's it's just blasting an acoustic chord in your face over and over again, or even a cello line or something like that, and again you get this kind of unnatural performance but with a really organic sound, and it just kind of makes it a little bit more interesting. Then you also add in the fact that it's not being done here in the box, it's with a modular, so you're also going to have to sort of accept an element of danger into your yeah, it's been great.
XYZ says cellos sound so brilliant behind synths, and that's one of the techniques that I've always enjoyed, and not just particular to that, but when you have two elements that are blended really well sonically, that you're a little bit unsure of what you're listening. So maybe the average listener doesn't really care, or they know, but for musicians, we're like wondering, like, wait, I thought that was a synth. Now I'm hearing like the bow drag across the string. Like, wait, are those strings or are they synth? Or and you try to pick that apart, but it ends up sounding a really cool part. Or even some other examples would be maybe like vocals and guitars, like that. What's that one part of the Boston song where the vocals keep coming up? It might be from More Than a Feeling, he goes up to like almost an impossibly high note, and it's actually like a guitar ringing out. And there's also an Aerosmith song that does that too, where which one was it? It was like Crazy or Amazing, or one of those from the early 90s, where you hear him and it sounds like there's a harmony vocal that came in with Steven Tyler, but it's actually like when you stop and just listen to it, it's just a straight guitar part, but it's doing a vocal part along with the vocalist, which I always found interesting. It kind of throws your ear a little bit, but then it makes it interesting.
I think Portishead does some of that stuff too, where they have the singer, the vocal is tracked by like an MS-20 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly how it all works, but her pitch is also being tracked by the oscillator from the MS-20.
Huh.
So even with the subtleties of the tuning of her voice being represented in the MS-20?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know exactly how it works. I just know that that's something that they've done.
Yeah, so some sort of pitch to MIDI conversion.
That's cool.
Really cool. I forgot about Portishead. What an interesting
I thought it was Portishead, but Native VS the same. Is it Goldfrapp? I can't remember. It's one of those two bands though. I thought it was Portishead that did that.
Yeah, well, either way, I'm glad you brought up Portishead because I forgot about them. They are. I just hadn't thought about them in forever.
And that reminds me of another like gear experimentation gone right, and that would be names today. What's her face?
The one with the eyes, and she has the hair, and
she has a face, and the
one.
The nose. She's got that nose.
The pitch shifter, and the vocoder, and the
Imogen Heap.
Yeah, Imogen Heap.
Yeah.
Yeah, first time I heard that song, like, what the hell is going on?
Yes.
In fact, the first time I heard it was on that trip that I was telling you guys about. I was like, wait, we're listening to that again. Like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, because that's a voice, but it's not, and I got to figure that out.
Yeah, she does some amazing things with technology and kind of blurring lines between what's organic and what's like straight up technology. She's so good at that, so creative with that. She was in that. She in the. I can't remember the dude. What was his name? The guy with the hair and the eyes. Anyway, whoever the producer was, that she, the mouth and the nose. And she worked with they were called Frou, and they made a record like in mid 2000s, I think, like 2005, 2006. Frou, yeah. Paul Ortola's got it. I can't think of the guy's. I can't think of the producer's name, but it's him and Imogen Heap. Anyway, they've just done a re-release of that and a remix of it, and added a couple of tracks that weren't included in the original release. It is a absolute classic, and just the way that they blend their instrumentation is very, very cool. And there's really not a lot of acoustic sounding stuff. There's sampled things for sure, but I don't think there's any. Yeah, but that's I don't know. That's kind of a little bit of an offshoot, but it's coming back out. So if you guys haven't heard that Frou record, I think they just made the one.
I remember that record. That was cool. Yeah, I'm trying to add it right now to see if it's on there. So they're going to re-release it, huh?
Yeah, I just saw that they're going to re-release it. I think they, probably remastered it or something too. But there are a couple of additional bonus tracks or something.
Nice.
But anyway, Imogen, yeah, she's so imaginative with her use of vocals and electronics, and man, like she's definitely somebody to check out. Everybody.
Yep. Man, there's so much good stuff to check out. It's like I feel like I got to go do a deep dive for the rest of the night now.
I know. What's true though, and thankfully.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite tools to take acoustic elements, whether that's something that you've played in or it's from a sound library? What's your favorite tools to mingle it up and have fun with it, or make it something otherworldly, out of a an acoustic instrument?
Man, for me lately, the modular Death Star I built, which is unfortunately kind of right next to the camera, so I can't really show it without taking the whole desk down with me. Um, that's got some stuff in there that I'm loving. Like I've added the I'm going to mispronounce all this stuff because I don't know how it's pronounced, but two of the instro modules, the looper and the arbhar, whatever that is, granular, are both great. Morphogene, once I kind of figured it out and got it to where it was doing stuff that I wanted, is phenomenal, especially for triggering rhythmic stuff, because you can slice up, a chord progression into one slice and then sort of automate it to change the chords, but have it play each chord or each sample that you want a number of times before it moves on, and so that's cool. And then running some of that stuff through like the qubit data bender or other effects, and that's when you're really sort of taking your life in your hands, because it's going to do whatever it wants. But it's great what it does. And so that stuff has been fantastic, just kind of running it through modular stuff. And also I like throwing stuff across pads in Machine and doing stuff with it internally, because you can really get surgical and control stuff that way. So that's kind of how my brain's been working, is like, do I want chaos and all fun, and will I accept what it's going to do? Then let's go modular, and that's been most of the time. Or do I have a specific thing in my head and I need to execute? Then I'm usually kind of over here.
Yeah, because you can slice it up and assign it to the pads however you care to.
How about you, Tim? I know you've done a lot of it on our recordings. Like, you've always got little sonic candy that you're working with.
Yeah, I hear those as real parts. Like that's kind of how I experience music. Is those things are more than just ear candy or whatever to me. It's like actually part of the fabric in a way. So yeah, whatever. I mean, Ben and I actually have a lot of similar things, because since we interact so often, we kind of go, hey man, have you checked this out or whatever, and then so we end up getting some of the same pieces. But yeah, the Lubad and Arbor, and those are great devices for doing things. The data bender I've used on a couple of tracks.
Yeah, I love that.
Fun.
I want one of those.
It's cool, and definitely when you put something in it that's acoustic or organic, and then have it sort of make it do things that could not be played by a person, then it's just ear catching, because it has a familiarity of whatever that instrument is and that organic quality. So it's got a familiarity right away, but at the same time it's doing something that's very unusual. So I think it draws you in and then spits you back out in a good way. It sucks you in and spits you out, but like in a good way. And so yeah, I mean, mostly those devices have been my favorite way to manipulate any kind of acoustic instruments. I don't know, other than to chop them up manually or something and just try to kind of make something happen that way. Mm-hmm. But it does depend on. Oh, Paul Stretch, right? Mr. Cowfood is saying Paul Stretch is a tool. That's very cool. You can take a song and stretch it out to last like 5 hours. Like, it slows everything down so much. I have it from about 5 years ago. Somebody turned me on to that, and I just tried it.
Is it like, does it change the pitch too?
No.
So it's the same pitch. Does it give you a bunch of artifacts and stuff?
I mean, I'm sure that it does. But whatever it's doing is acceptable enough and so radical. Like, you can listen for when the vocal first comes in, say if it's just a regular pop tune or something, and from the very first vocal note, you can hear it come in, but things are moving by at this glacial speed, or like watching clouds slowly drift by. You hear the song like slowly starting, and you can kind of hear a voice come in and go, and it's just like it's really interesting. I know that sounds maybe ridiculous, but it's really interesting. And if you can find the sweet spot about like how slow to to make it happen.
It kind of reminds me of like one of those YouTube videos of like B movie where they take it and like every time they say a certain word, it slows down a certain amount, and then by the end, it's like a 28-hour video or something like that. That kind of stuff.
Far out, yeah, exactly.
Like who watches that? Then it gets like 10 million views, you know.
Who watches? Yeah, but they all watch the first minute and 20 seconds.
Right. Yeah.
They're not watching the end.
Yeah.
You know, that sounds like it'd be useful in sound design. I'm thinking like, so my wife and I have been watching through the Godzilla movies, you know, all the way back to like 1954. And so I did a little digging to check out to see, like, particularly in the first movies, like, well, how did they make the Godzilla roar? So the sound design in that, I mean, and there's literally an acoustic instrument. I think a lot of it was made with a double bass, and they were using a glove that had rosin on it and sliding it up and down the strings, and then they slowed the tape down to create this big roar. And so things like that, I mean, so sometimes that would be one of the interesting ways, is to take normal sounds and then stretch them, you know, one way or the other. Like, especially, I mean, pitch down seems to be super cool. You take something that's very ordinary sounding, and all of a sudden it's thunderous.
Yeah,
when it's been manipulated.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, backwards and slower are like definitely my two favorites.
Yeah, I did something the other day where I just wanted kind of lo-fi piano chords, but I didn't want to just use a plug-in to do it. I wanted to make it harder than that for some reason. So I played, rather than try to play the sample twice the speed so I could then slow it down and have it be the right tempo, I played it at the octave at tempo, ran it into Morphogene, doubled the speed and the tempo, recorded that into the Luba, slowed that down, and it was pretty messed up by the time it got back, and it was awesome. It was great. And just kind of messing with that back and forth was great. It was different. You know, I'd done it where I just used one of those things or the other and kind of did the math I needed to do to figure out, you know, where I needed to start, what octave, what tempo, so that I could end up with the slowed down version that I wanted. But this was kind of like a step further, and it ended up being really cool.
That's great, super creative use, you know, and just and taking the time to do it is, if you have it, it's half the fun right there. It's half of like, it's super gratifying to know, yeah, that's mine. Like, I did that. No one else exactly has that. It's not a plug-in.
Yeah, it wouldn't go the same way for me if I did it again.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Yep. Hit record. Hit the record button.
So Marshall, since you know, you don't have your data bender yet, what would be some of the tools that you would use to manipulate things?
So some of the early stuff I started doing when I started getting synths was when I got a Roland V synth. You could sample into that, and you can use that little time stretch pad that they had on there. So I would do some of that using the time trip pad on the V synth to manipulate. It was usually vocals, you know. And then just as I remember when Pro Tools started adding in the ability to do some of the time stretch stuff that we're talking about, that was fantastic. You know, because you could take samples that were at different tempos and bring them in and get them synced up without destroying the pitch, you know. So that's pretty much the extent of it, though. I haven't done too much with sampling, but when I do, it was, you know, it's with vocals usually.
Mm-hmm.
Which is super effective, and there it is again. It's like immediately it's the familiarity of the human voice, you know, and of a vocal, and then but like, wow, it's kind of jacked up. That's cool.
Yeah,
it's not quite right.
Yeah, or it would either be like I would try and mangle the vocal a little bit, or just using a vocoder even is pretty cool. So
do you have a vocoder?
Yeah, a lot of these synths have vocoders on them.
Like, which one do you use?
So the Chord Radius has a really good vocoder in it. The Micro Modular has a pretty good vocoder. The V-Synth GT has a built-in vocoder. The original V-Synth, you can buy one of the PCM cards that'll turn it into a vocoder. But the GT and the XT, when those came out, they came with that vocal designer section. And that's, I think, I've tried the Moog 1 vocoder, and it's awful. At least the last time I tried it. I haven't tried it in years now, but I didn't like it. I'm trying to think which other ones have vocoders in them. This little guy over here, that's the Novation Ultranova. That's got a vocoder in it. Not particularly fond of that one, really, but yeah. So there, I think the Virus can do vocoding. I might be wrong on that, but anyway, there's a whole bunch of them. A lot of synths, especially if they're digital. Yeah. They've probably got some kind of vocoder element in them. Most of them.
Yeah.
Cryss, what about you?
Well, my first foray into making things different would have been with when back in the day when I was just recording on a 4-track. I had the old Boss DR110 drum machine. I'm like, what can I do with this thing? I sort of just ran it through my guitar pedals, and so often what I would go to would be just like a digital delay, and I would start syncing the tempo up to create interesting rhythmic patterns that I couldn't program in, and so it kind of started with that, I would say. And probably the evolution of that is that, once you got into the box and that kind of stuff, that still having fun with, some of the more creative delays that are out there, but also granular effects. I mean, there's a lot of granular synthesis stuff, which is cool, but even taking some of the granular effects and doing stuff with that, or some of these plugins that have like mod matrices or matrices or whatever, things like Shaper Box. I'm just totally drawing a blank. I tried to pull up Logic just now because I was gonna to be able to check my plugin list, and for whatever reason it decided to scan all my audio units, and I'm too embarrassed to tell you how long it's going to take. But
it's okay.
Well, one of the ones the couple that I've used a lot was Output Portal, and again, you can start doing some crazy stuff. It's got multi-segment envelopes, and you can be adjusting time and pitch shifting and doing things like that, filtering. All those kind of things, and applying it. And then one of the nice things about it being in a plugin form is that the synchronization with the DAW. So a lot of those type of effects that I do would be with delay and granular effects. I want to have them sync to tempo so there can be some sort of rhythmic element to it. And, using plugins like that, it just makes it so easy. I mean, not to say you couldn't do it with some outboard gear too, because you can. It's just a little more complicated of a process.
Cool. Yeah, Output has some great plugins. I think they're very creative in what they offer up, and they're usable. That's always the thing. Like sometimes you can get something that's highly imaginative, but you have one shot at using it, and that's about it. And I find their stuff is great though.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, is like you got to be able to, and these days, like something we've preached about a lot. It's like if you take in more than you're learning as far as buying stuff, that's going to limit what you can do. But choosing a few of those plugins to really deep dive into. And there's some of the new Arturia stuff that is on my list that it's like I have them, I know that they're there, I've used them a little bit, but those are ones that I got to deep dive and start making some presets for, because it can do some really interesting things. Their new like Cold Fire and their fragments and things like that. Like those are great sound design tools that have a lot of application, but I mean, you can preset surf, but I don't really find a lot of great results with that until you sit and you make something for your song.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And by the way, that was not anything against using presets, because I use presets all the time. I make presets, I use presets. It's just like in that particular application, that's an application that really helps it if you kind of define the parameters of what needs to happen. Much like you guys would do working with the modular and going, this is what I need Databender or whatever Morphogene to do.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I think we've covered that topic pretty great. Obviously, we could, go on because it's a pretty deep well there, a lot of possibilities, but seems like we have done pretty good. I guess we're kind of at the end of our normally scheduled time here. So let's go around the horn quick and just everybody tell us what's coming up, Cryss, we'll start with you again. Just what's coming up for you next week or next?
Yeah, well, usually I try to get Thursdays as a day off, so I'm looking forward to working on our track a bit more. So,
nice.
I just I've got some things to do around the house, but then after I get that done, I'm just looking forward to sitting and working with it and being creative. The work that you guys have done recently on the track is amazing, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm already anticipating it with excitement, and that's a good place to be, because I know that it'll help me bring forth the creativity, and knowing that I've got to rise up to your level, and the kind of stuff that you guys are doing is always a great motivation and push. It really, when you have other good musicians to work with, or musicians that are pushing you, that both inspiring you and making you up your game, that's a good place to be. Not always the most comfortable, but it's a good place to be.
Amen to that.
So yeah, that's about it for me.
Cool. Well, Marshall, what's up, man? What's next?
What's up? I'm just gonna be doing my same old thing, man. I'm gonna keep working on that live rig setup here. Hopefully, get that going sooner than later. I do have some tracks that I've been working on production wise as well that I want to get put out on my label. Yeah, so it's just same old stuff, pretty much. And then I'll see you guys next week.
Absolutely. All right. Very cool. All right, Ben Jackson, let's go to you to close us out tonight, man. Thanks for being on the show and tell us what's coming up.
Thanks for having me, man. I just have kind of wrapped up a handful of projects, so I've got a little room for air coming up. I do have some mixing to do on a female vocalist project, but other than that, I'm going to kind of drill back into some writing. I've got a thing for Penn Jones that I kind of got started last night that I need to clean up before I send out. So I'm hoping to get into that here, and kind of really looking forward to digging into some creative time over the next couple weeks before the next round of other people's music comes in.
Yeah. That's great. You do a good job, I think, of balancing, which is hard, but balancing your own output and then, running a studio that needs to be fed.
Yeah.
As you do. So, but you do a pretty great job, I think, of balancing that, and that's no easy feat. So, kudos to you for that.
Thanks, dude.
Not an easy thing to do. Cool. And for me, I've just sort of rewired my studio. You can see there's a bunch of
cables on the
there's
floor
some
there.
cables back here. Yeah, looking nice.
Is that being done for inductance there?
I heard
yes.
you could just put some newspaper over it, cover it up. It's fine.
Yeah, that and some gaff tape, and some interesting things can happen when visitors come over. But yeah, I just got to finish reassembling. It's going to be great. I had a guy locally here that was very helpful and mostly just inspired me to do it because I was sitting there kind of stuck in my own, I don't know, sometimes you lose your momentum on stuff. So it was helpful to have have him come over and just kind of spur me in the direction and shake me loose of that, just being frozen. It's weird. But so yeah, that's mostly what I'm up to this week. Penn Jones stuff is coming up. Got a couple things to do to make that happen, and then we'll mix.
Yeah.
But that's mostly it. So yeah, hey, chatties and all our friends there. Thanks for checking it out. Thanks for listening wherever you are. And I know some of you are like in the early wee hours of the morning, so we sure do appreciate your hanging out with us and adding to the conversation. And again, that's part of what we try to do here with this show, is just to kind of share info and inspire each other and learn from each other and try to be better producers and musicians and level up the game. So we appreciate you guys. And Cryss, Marshall, Ben, it was a good show, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.